They say weddings are about love, joy, and the beginning of a new chapter. But what no one tells you is that sometimes weddings expose the truth that's been hiding beneath years of smiles. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm a simple mechanic by trade, a father by heart, and someone who's spent a lifetime believing that goodness always earns respect. I was wrong. The story I'm about to tell you didn't begin with betrayal. It began with pride. The kind of pride only a father feels when he sees his son, Ethan, standing in front of him, ready to start a life of his own. I raised Ethan on hard work and honesty. His mother passed when he was young, so I gave him everything I could, not wealth, not luxury, but values. Every scar on my hand, every wrinkle on my face, was a small piece of that sacrifice. And when he finally found love, I thought maybe all of it was worth it. Her name was Leila Cole, daughter of one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city, Richard Cole. Their family lived in a different world, one filled with designer suits, private jets, and country clubs. But I didn't care about that. If she loved my son, then she was already family. The first time we met, she was polite. Her smile was perfect, maybe a little too perfect. She complimented my old car, said my workshop smelled like stories, and told me Ethan was lucky to have a father like me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she saw beyond my old jeans and rough hands. But deep down, I noticed something. The way her eyes hesitated before shaking my hand. Still, I ignored it, because love blinds even the wisest hearts. Then came the wedding day. It was held in one of the grandest hotels in the city, chandeliers, brighter than daylight, marble floors that echoed every step, tables lined with silver and gold. I stood at the entrance, holding my small gift for the couple, a handmade wooden photo frame with their initials carved into it, something I'd made myself. Guests arrived in luxury cars, wearing clothes worth more than my entire workshop. But I didn't feel small. I felt proud. Proud that my son had found a place in such a beautiful world. The ceremony began. Ethan stood tall, nervous, but happy. And when he saw me, his eyes softened, the same eyes that once looked up to me as a hero. For a brief moment, I thought, this is it. This is every father's dream. But dreams have a cruel way of ending. During the reception, after the dances and toasts, Lila took the microphone to give her speech. Her voice was sweet, her words elegant, until she said something that silenced the entire room. She turned to me, her smile cold as ice, and said, "And as for my new well, I guess every family has that one relative who doesn't quite fit the picture, but we love him anyway." The room froze. A few people laughed nervously. My hands trembled under the table. Doesn't fit the picture. That's what I'd become. A flaw in their perfect photograph. Ethan's face fell. He looked torn, humiliated, and helpless. And me, I just smiled, pretending I didn't hear it. Because what else could I do? A man like me doesn't make scenes. He remembers. As the music played and laughter returned, I sat there in silence. But inside, something shifted. Something deep and cold, the kind of feeling that doesn't fade. That night, as I walked out of that golden hall alone, I promised myself something. If she thought I was a family embarrassment, then I'd to make sure she learned that the most dangerous kind of man is the one the world underestimates. You can mock a man for what he wears, but never forget the same hands that look worn can rebuild an entire empire. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a weight on my chest that words couldn't carry. The laughter from that night still echoed in my ears, twisting into something uglier with every replay. I told myself not to take it to heart after all. It was just a joke. But here's the truth about jokes. They always come wrapped in honesty. What Leila said wasn't just a comment. It was a confession. That's how she truly saw me. An oil-stained mechanic who was an unfortunate footnote in her glamorous life story. I went to my workshop, the one place where I always felt in control. The smell of sawdust and grease usually calmed me, but that day, it just reminded me of the world I came from, the world she looked down on. I picked up a wrench. It's cold, hard steel, a familiar comfort. For years, these hands had fixed things, engines, pipes, broken toys. Now, all I wanted to fix was the broken pride of a father who had given his all, only to be dismissed. A few days later, Ethan called. His voice was strained. "Dad," about what Leela said, ... She didn't mean it. She was just nervous. I could hear the lie in his voice, the desperation to smooth things over. "It's all right, son," I said, my voice steady. It was a party. People say things, but we both knew it wasn't all right. He was caught in the middle, between the father who raised him and the wife whose world he now inhabited. His apology felt hollow because it wasn't his to give. That conversation was the turning point. It wasn't about getting even with Lila anymore. It was about showing my son and the world that my worth wasn't defined by the dirt under my fingernails, but by the integrity in my heart and the skill in my hands. My revenge wouldn't be loud or angry. It would be quiet. It would be built. I started small. I took all my life savings, not much by the coal standards, but a fortune to me, and invested it. Not in stocks, not in real estate, but in myself. I began designing a new type of engine component, an idea I'd been sketching in old notebooks for years. It was a high-efficiency part that could revolutionize fuel consumption in older vehicles. Everyone told me the market was too saturated, that the big corporations would crush me. They saw an old mechanic with a pipe dream. They didn't see the decades of hands-on knowledge that no engineer with a fancy degree could ever match. I worked day and night. The workshop became my sanctuary. While Leela and Ethan attended galas and charity balls, I was covered in grime, perfecting my prototype. Some nights, I'd fall asleep on a pile of rags, only to wake up with the sunrise and get right back to it. Ethan would visit sometimes, looking uncomfortable amongst the clutter of my world. "Dad, are you sure about this?" he'd ask. "You're putting everything into it." I'd just smile and say, "Son, a man who builds with his own hands never has nothing." Months turned into a year. I finally had a working prototype. I took it to a small, independent auto show. The big names weren't there, just gearheads and small-time investors. But word travels fast when something is truly good. My little booth was mobbed. People were amazed. A journalist from a niche automotive magazine wrote a small piece about the old-timer mechanic who might just change the game. That small article was the spark. It caught the attention of a mid-level executive at a major auto parts manufacturer, competitor of Richard Cole's empire. They sent a team to my workshop. They expected a state-of-the-art facility. Instead, they found me in my oil-stained overalls, surrounded by tools older than they were. But when I showed them the data, when I demonstrated the efficiency of my design, their skepticism melted away. They made me an offer. It wasn't just for the patent. They wanted me to lead the new division. They valued my experience, my hands-on approach. The man Leela Cole had called a misfit was now being courted by one of the biggest names in the industry. The news broke, and it hit the business world like a shockwave. Suddenly, Thomas Reed wasn't just Ethan's embarrassing father. I was the innovator, the underdog genius. Richard Cole's company, which had been resting on its laurels for years, suddenly had a serious competitor, and that competitor was led by me. The first time I saw Lila after the news broke was at a family dinner Ethan insisted on. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She tried to act normal, congratulating me with that same perfect, plastic smile. "We're so proud of you, Thomas," she said. But her eyes told a different story. They held a flicker of fear. The picture had changed, and I was no longer the one who didn't fit. Real revenge, I've learned, isn't about watching someone fall. It's about letting them watch you rise. It's the quiet smile of a man who knows his time has come. Because real power isn't about the money you have. It's about the value you create. And my hands, the same hands she once hesitated to touch, were now building an empire she could only watch in awe. For days, I walked through town pretending everything was fine. People greeted me the same, but their smiles had changed softer, more pitying. I could see it in their eyes. They'd heard what she said. I became the story people whispered about behind their coffee cups. That poor old mechanic, his own daughter-in-law, embarrassed him in front of everyone. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't sound like shouting. It sounds like laughter that keeps replaying in your head long after the music stops. I went back to work in my small workshop, the place that had been my pride for decades. Grease, dust, and the smell of fuel that was my world. But even there, I couldn't escape the echo of humiliation. Customers spoke gently to me now, like I was fragile, like I needed their sympathy. That, more than anything, broke something inside me. Because I never wanted sympathy. I wanted respect. One evening, I sat alone in the workshop long after sunset, staring at my hands rough, scarred, old. These hands had raised my son, built his future, and fixed 100 broken engines. Yet now, they felt useless. That's when I whispered to myself, maybe she's right. Maybe I don't fit their picture. But even as I said it, another voice inside me whispered louder. Or maybe their picture isn't worth being in. A man who loses respect doesn't break, he transforms. Because nothing is more dangerous than a man who has nothing left to prove. A week later, I decided to visit Ethan and Leela at their new mansion. It stood tall on the hill, polished white marble, tall gates, and a garden that looked like it came out of a magazine. As I walked toward the front door, I felt out of place, like a stain on a perfect canvas. I carried a basket of apples from my garden, from the same trees Ethan and I planted when he was 10. I thought it might bring back a memory. Lila opened the door. She looked surprised, and not the happy kind. Her smile was too sharp to be sincere. "Oh, Mr. Reed," she said, her tone dripping with politeness. "Ethan's not home right now. He's at a dinner with my father. You should have called." I nodded, pretending not to notice the way her eyes flicked over my worn-out jacket. "Just wanted to drop by," I said, holding out the basket. She forced another smile and closed the door gently, like she couldn't wait to lock it again. I stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the glass. An old man holding a basket of apples outside his own son's home. Then I turned and walked away. That walk down the driveway felt longer than any road I'd ever taken. When your own child forgets where he came from, the ache isn't in your heart, it's in your soul. The days that followed were quiet, but my mind wasn't. I replayed that moment over and over, not with anger, but with clarity. That's when I realized something. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. People like Lila, they destroy themselves with their own arrogance. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to remind her what real strength looks like. So I worked harder than ever. Every extra hour, every dollar I earned, I saved. But I wasn't saving for myself. I was building something, though at the time, I didn't fully know what. Behind the workshop, I started restoring an old truck. It was more than metal and bolts. It was a symbol. Every turn of the wrench reminded me that even something rusted and forgotten can rise again if you put love into it. They called me old. They called me poor. But what they didn't know was that old things have stories, and poor men have fire. One afternoon, a strange opportunity knocked. A luxury car had broken down outside of town, a model worth more than I'd ever seen. None of the local mechanics could fix it. One of the workers called me in as a last resort. When I arrived, I saw the car belonged to none other than Richard Khalila's father, the man whose empire I'd only seen in headlines. He stood beside the car, frustrated, talking to his assistant. When I introduced myself, he frowned slightly. "You?" he asked. I nodded, calm and steady. "Let me take a look." In less than an hour, I had that engine purring like it was brand new. Richard watched the whole thing, arms folded, his expression changing from doubt to respect. "Impressive," he said finally. "How did you know what was wrong?" I smiled faintly. "Sir, engines talk if you listen long enough." He chuckled. "A real one this time. You've got skill, Mr. Reed. Maybe more than my own men." Then he said the words that would change everything. "I might have a place for you in my company. Consulting, maybe part-time." I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, because deep inside, I knew this was the first opening in the wall that had been built against me. Revenge doesn't always arrive with fire and fury. Sometimes it comes disguised as a handshake. I started working for his company soon after. Quiet at first, just consulting on engine designs and helping the younger mechanics. I didn't mention Ethan. I didn't mention Leela. I didn't need to. I wanted to be known for my work, not my name. And soon, people started to notice. Richard respected results, and I delivered. Every project I touched succeeded. Every problem I solved earned me another layer of his trust. He invited me to meetings, to dinners, to gatherings filled with the same high society. People who once looked down on me, but this time, I didn't walk in as an outsider. I walked in as Richard Cole's trusted engineer, and one night, at a corporate event, that same golden-haired daughter of his walked in Lila hand in hand with my son. The same crowd from the wedding filled the room, but this time, I wasn't sitting in the corner. I stood beside Richard, introduced as one of his key advisors. When our eyes met, Lila froze. Her perfect smile faltered, just for a second. The best revenge I sent to make them fear Hewitts, to make them realize they never knew who you were to begin with. Because I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. They thought the old man had been forgotten. But the truth is, I was only waiting for the world to remember me on my terms. For months, I worked silently in Richard Cole's empire. Every morning I showed up early, caffeine and ready to work beside men half my age and twice as proud. They called me Old Reed at first, the same way people back home used to, but soon those words stopped sounding like mockery. They started sounding like respect. My ideas worked. My methods saved money. And my loyalty. That, Richard said, was worth more than any degree on paper. Each success brought me deeper into a circle. They discussed mergers, contracts, acquisitions, things. I barely understood at first, but I listened. I learned, and when I spoke, they listened back. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lila were living the kind of life people dream about. A big house, expensive cars, dinners, in places that required reservations months in advance. They looked perfect on the outside, but cracks had already started forming in their golden world. It began with small things. Ethan called less. When he did, he sounded distracted. Lila, on the other hand, was busier than ever with parties, brand meetings, and social events. She liked to be seen, but being seen and being happy are two very different things. People who build their happiness on appearances are like glass castles. They shine for a while, until someone dares to throw the first stone. One afternoon, Richard invited me to his estate for a private lunch. "Tom," he said as we sat in his study, "I've been thinking about retiring. My daughter and her husband, they're not ready to handle the business. They don't have the patience." "Whatever you need, sir," I said. That day, I went home and sat in my workshop long into the night, staring at that old truck I'd rebuilt. Its engine purred softly, steady and alive. I thought of the night at the wedding, the laughter, the humiliation, and then I smiled. The universe was finally realigning itself, one quiet gear at a time. Then, one evening, I overheard something that told me my silence had been worth every second. Leela was on a call in the corridor outside Richard's study. I didn't mean to listen, but her voice was sharp and impatient. "Dad trusts that old man too much," she hissed. "He's just a mechanic. What could he possibly know about corporate strategy?" I smiled quietly in the dark. She still hadn't learned. Later that night, Richard asked me to review a new investment proposal, a luxury car manufacturing subsidiary. It was risky, but the numbers could work if handled by someone who understood both engineering and efficiency. "Tom," he said, "I want you to lead this one." That project became my weapon, not to destroy, but to teach. That night, as applause filled the hall and Lila stood there speechless, I understood something profound. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to humiliate her the way she humiliated me. My silence was my strength, my patience, my weapon. And so, as the night ended and I shook Richard's hand, I smiled, because I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. That day, everything shifted. Richard started diverting more control my way. His trust in Ethan and Lila faded, and they began to feel the weight of being on the outside, not by force, but by consequence. Lila's pride couldn't handle it. She started throwing lavish events again, as if to remind everyone that she was still the important one. One of those events was a charity gala. Of course, I was invited this time, not as a guest, but as an honoree. When I arrived, the room fell silent for a moment. People whispered, "That's Thomas Reed, Richard Cole's partner." Lila tried to maintain her composure, smiling for photos, but her eyes were restless. When she came over, her words were polite, but her tone was brittle. "Mr. Reed," she said, "how nice of you to join us." I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. After all, it's for a good cause, helping people rebuild. The irony wasn't lost on her. Nothing unsettles a proud person more than seeing the one they once humiliated stand taller than them without raising his voice. After that night, she started digging. She asked Richard questions about me, about my role, about the ownership structure. But Richard was a private man. He told her only what she needed to know. And what she didn't know was that every new deal, every contract, every expansion had my name attached somewhere. Meanwhile, Ethan began to drift. His marriage was strained. He visited me one day, alone, sitting quietly in the workshop. He looked tired, older than his years. "Dad," he said, "I think Lila and I were not seeing eye to eye." I said nothing for a while. Then I told him softly, "Son, when you build a home on pride instead of respect, the walls don't crumble. They just stop feeling like home." He looked at me with the same eyes he had as a boy eyes that once saw me as his hero. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. It wasn't revenge I felt at that moment. It was sadness, because even in all my anger, I never wanted my son to suffer. But sometimes pain is the only teacher people listen to. When life humbles the ones who betrayed you, it doesn't ask your permission. It just makes sure you're there to watch Mons Passette. Richard grew older, and I grew wiser. One day, he called me into his study again. The man they once called a family embarrassment was now the backbone of their fortune, and soon that truth would no longer be hidden. Some storms don't come with thunder. They come with quiet men who waited long enough to let the world finally hear their silence roar. There are moments in life that don't come with thunder or lightning. They arrive quietly, like a soft wind before a storm. That's how it began. Day. Shift. The silent unraveling of everything Ethan and Lila thought they controlled. Richard's health started to fade. His once steady hands trembled when he signed documents. He spoke slower, rested longer, and often asked for me to sit with him. "You remind me of who I was before all this," he told me one evening, staring out the window of his mansion. "Hard work, integrity, the things people forget when money starts talking louder than conscience." He trusted me completely now. So when he asked me to oversee his affairs during his illness, I didn't refuse. I handled everything: contracts, employees, and financials. Slowly, the empire that Lila once believed she'd inherit began to orbit around my decisions. The cruelest twist of fate isn't when you lose power. It's when the person you once looked down upon becomes the one holding your world together. Lila noticed. She always noticed. Behind her carefully crafted smiles, I could see panic flickering. She'd host dinner parties where her voice would get sharper, her laugh more forced. People whispered when I entered the room, now not about me, but about her. Isn't that her father's business partner? They'd say, "I heard he's running everything now." That whisper spread like wildfire. And pride, when cornered, doesn't retreat. It lashes out. One evening, as Richard rested upstairs, Lila stormed into his study while I was reviewing some documents. She didn't knock. "This has gone far enough," she said coldly. "You may have fooled my father, but I know your kind. You're after his company, his wealth, our legacy." I looked up, calm, steady. "Your legacy," I repeated softly. "Or his." Her eyes flared. "Don't play games with me, old man." I smiled faintly. "I'm not playing, Leela. You've done enough of that for both of us." Pride blinds people so completely that when they finally see the truth, it's already too late to close their eyes. She turned to leave, but before she did, I added quietly, "You know, your father never treated me like an outsider. You did that all on your own." She didn't respond, but from that day forward, her mask began to crack. Richard's condition worsened in the following months. During his final days, he called me into his room. His voice was frail, but his words carried the weight of decades. "Tom, promise me something. Keep this company alive. Don't let greed tear it apart. You know who deserves what?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I promise." He passed away 2 days later. The funeral was grand to kind. The rich are known for. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and condolences poured in like waves. Lila stood at the center, dressed in black silk, face composed for the world's sympathy. But Erais. Oh, those eyes darted toward me every few minutes, restless and fearful. She knew something she couldn't name was coming. When death visits, it doesn't just take a person. It takes the illusions people built around them. A week later, the reading of Richard's will was held in his estate's old library. The air was thick with tension. Leela and Ethan sat side by side, hands clasped, pretending unity. I sat quietly across the room. The lawyer, an old friend of Richard's, opened the folder. He began reading in a measured tone the usual pleasantries, charitable donations, and trusts. Then came the line that froze everyone. "To my trusted friend and partner, Thomas Reed, I leave controlling interest in coal industry's 51% ownership and full executive authority to lead the company as he deems fit." The room went silent. Ethan's face went pale. Lila's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "my remaining assets are to be divided equally among my family members, under Mr. Reed's supervision." Lila shot to her feet. "This is a mistake. My father would never This man manipulated him." The lawyer didn't flinch. "Mr. Cole signed these documents in full awareness, witnessed by 2 independent parties." I sat still, watching her crumble. No satisfaction. No gloating. Just a deep, quiet finality. Revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through a lawyer's voice and the sound of papers being signed. After the reading, I walked out into the garden, away from the murmurs. Ethan followed. He looked broken, lost. "Dad," he said softly, "what just happened?" I turned to him. "What happened, son, is justice, not revenge justice. The man your wife mocked was the man your father-in-law trusted more than anyone." He lowered his head, shame flooding his face. "I didn't know. I should have stood up for you." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Now you know. It's not too late to start over." That moment wasn't about triumph. It was about truth. Ethan, for the first time, looked at me not as a burden or an embarrassment, but as a man who had survived the fire and walked out with his soul intact. True revenge doesn't destroy blood. It purifies. Italiano. But Lila wasn't done. Pride like hers never dies quietly. Within weeks, she tried to contest the will. She hired lawyers, spread rumors, and even tried to paint me as an opportunist who preyed on a dying man's kindness. It was a war she thought she could win because she always had. Except this time, every document, every transaction, every clause was sealed with Richard's signature. Every lawyer she called, every shareholder she approached, they all told her the same thing. Thomas Reed is the rightful owner. Her rage turned desperate. She started losing allies. The press she once courted began questioning her motives. Brands distanced themselves. Her social circles shrank overnight. The same people who once toasted her name were now whispering about her downfall. One evening, she came to my office unannounced. Her face was pale, mascara streaked from tears. "You've taken everything from me," she said bitterly. "Everything." I looked at her, not with anger, bad wheat. "Pity? No, Lila. You lost everything the day you forgot what respect looks like." She sank into the chair, silent for a long time. Then, softly, "Why didn't you humiliate me back then, at the wedding? Why didn't you say anything?" I sighed. "Because I knew life would say it for me. When you let time fight your battles, it never misses its target." After that night, she disappeared from the public eye. Moved away, they said, sold her jewelry, closed her accounts, and vanished into silence. Ethan stayed behind, working with me. Slowly, we rebuilt our bond, father and son, scarred but standing. Years passed, and Cold Industries grew stronger under our guidance. Ethan matured, humbled, and became wiser. Sometimes he'd ask about Lila. I'd tell him only this: people who build their happiness on pride will always end up homeless when pride collapses. Then, one rainy afternoon, something unexpected happened. A knock on my office door, gentle, hesitant. When I looked up, Lila stood there. Her hair was shorter, her clothes plain, no jewelry, no entourage, just a quiet, weary woman. "I came to say thank you," she whispered, "for not destroying me completely." I studied her for a moment. "Lila, I never wanted destruction, just understanding." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "You got it." She turned to leave, pausing only once to say, "I hope you know I was wrong." And for the first time, I believed her. The greatest revenge isn't making them pay. It's making them see. When Sa left, I stood at the window, watching her disappear into the rain, the same rain that had fallen the night of the wedding years ago. Except now, it didn't sting. It felt like closure. I realized something profound then. Revenge had never been about retribution. It was about redemption, about proving that dignity, patience, and time are stronger than pride, cruelty, or wealth. The boy who once couldn't afford a suit had outlasted the ones who wore crowns. Sometimes, you don't need to ruin your enemies, just outlast them until their arrogance collapses under its own weight. Years had passed since that rainy day when Lila walked out of my office for the last time. The world had moved on, but the lessons it left behind still echoed in my heart. Coal Industries had become a symbol of integrity under my and Ethan's leadership. The company that once symbolized arrogance and entitlement was now known for humility, fairness, and innovation. People often said I'd changed everything, that I'd rewritten the legacy Reacher left behind. But I always smiled at that. No, I hadn't rewritten it. I'd simply reminded people what it meant to have honor. The sweetest revenge isn't in breaking others. It is in rebuilding yourself so high that they can reach the place you once stood. Ethan worked tirelessly beside me. He wasn't the naive man I once knew. He listened, learned, and more importantly, respected. The arrogance that once clouded his judgment had faded. In its place was quiet gratitude as son who had finally found his father again. One evening, as we sat in my study reviewing reports, he spoke softly, almost "Dad," he said, "I still think about everything that happened with Leela, the company, grandfather's will. You? Sometimes I wonder how you forgave me after all that." I closed the folder, leaned back in my chair, and looked at him. "Ethan, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without letting the memory poison you." He lowered his gaze, thoughtful. "I don't deserve the second chance you gave me." I smiled faintly. "None of us ever do. That's what makes it valuable. True revenge." I sent a servet cold. It served calm, when you've healed enough not to need it anymore. Life has a way of restoring balance in the most unexpected ways. While some fade into quiet anonymity, others find meaning in the very humility they once despised. I started a charitable wing in my company, funding agricultural projects for struggling farmers' people just like the man I once was. And when I saw those families smiling, holding their first harvests, I couldn't help but think, this is what power is supposed to do. Every time I walked through those green fields, I felt my soul breathe again. The same rough hands that once toiled in dirt were now planting seeds of hope for others. I had come full circle. Yet, even in peace, life isn't without echoes from the past. One day a plain, unmarked envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a letter in delicate handwriting. It was from Leela. "Dear Mr. Reed," it began. "I wanted to write sooner, but pride wouldn't let me. I've been working at a small community center, helping women rebuild their lives after losing everything. I finally understand what you mean about respect, about worth. I hope one day I can repay the lesson you taught me. I'm sorry." I read the letter twice, then set it down gently. There was no bitterness left in me, only a quiet understanding. When the people who once hurt you learn from the pain they caused, that's when revenge transforms into legacy. That evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The sky was painted in gold and crimson, the colors of endings and new beginnings. I thought about that night at the wedding, the humiliation, the silence, the pain, how powerless I had felt, and how powerless they had become later. Not because I struck back, but because I stood still when they expected me to fall. That's the secret no one tells you about revenge. Silence is its sharpest weapon. The more you let time work, the more precisely it cuts. Years later, I turned 75. The same age Risher was when he first took me under his wing. Etha threw a small gathering. Nothing grand, just family, old friends, and a few loyal employees. As I stood before them, raising a glass, I said something that came straight from my heart. Life will always test you through people you love. They'll betray you. They'll doubt you. But if you hold your dignity when all else breaks, one day those same people will wish they had your strength. Don't seek revenge to prove your worth. Live well enough that your life becomes revenge itself. The best revenge story isn't told through words. It's lived through peace. The applause was soft, but sincere. Ethan stood beside me, his eyes shining. "You've done more than forgive, Dad," he whispered later. "You've turned every wound into wisdom." I smiled at that. Wounds don't destroy us, son. Denying them does. After the guests left, I walked through the garden, the same kind of garden where I had felt invisible at my own son's wedding. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. I looked up at the stars, countless and indifferent, yet comforting in their stillness. And then I realized something profound. I no longer felt anger, or loss, or even victory. Just stillness. The kind that comes when you've finally made peace with your story. Revenge may start with rage, but it ends with the realization that you never needed to prove your worth to those who could unsee it. In time, I retired, handing everything to Ethan. He managed it with honesty and compassion. The company became not just a business, but a foundation for hope scholarships, hospitals, and small-town grants that changed lives quietly, steadily. Every time I saw a child in one of those schools, or a farmer holding his first profit, I saw reflections of the man I once was. Tired, bruised, but unbroken. Ethan and I often visited those farms together. One day, as we watched the workers, he asked, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" I thought for a moment, then said, "No. If they had, we wouldn't be here. Pain teaches what comfort never could." He nodded slowly. "You were right all along, Dad. Life does pay back, in its own time." I smiled. It always does. You just have to be patient enough to collect. Patience is the interest revenge pays when you stop chasing it. And then came the day I least expected. A knock at my farmhouse door. I opened it to find Lila standing there once more. Older now, lines marking her face, but her eyes were clear and sincere. "I heard about your work," she said quietly. "You've done good things." "So have you," I replied, remembering her letter. She smiled faintly. "I guess we both learned late." "Better late than never," I said. She hesitated. "Do you forgive me?" I looked at her, really looked, and felt no anger, only peace. "Lila, I forgave you long before you ever asked. You were just too proud to believe it." A tear slid down her cheek. "Thank you." She left soon after, and I knew that chapter was finally closed. Not with fury, not with triumph, but with grace. Revenge loses its fire the moment forgiveness lights the way. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, Ethan brought out an old photo album. There were pictures of my wife, our farm, the first crops, the company launch, the awards, the family we rebuilt. And there, between all those frozen moments, was the story of a man who refused to be defined by how others treated him. A man who chose patience over pride, dignity over despair. And that, I realized, was the real revenge, not what I took from others, but what I refused to let them take from me. So, when I sit on my porch and watch the sunset paint the sky, I often think about what it all means. The cruel laughter that once echoed in my chest has long faded, replaced by the quiet hum of peace. There was a time I believed revenge meant winning, proving them wrong, showing them what they'd lost. But life, in its quiet wisdom, taught me something else. Revenge isn't about them. It's about you, about choosing to rise instead of routing in bitterness. The greatest revenge isn't turning the tables. It's walking away from the table altogether, knowing you no longer need a seat. I used to think power meant money or status. I was wrong. True power is silensta. Kind that comes not from fear, but from self-control. The day I stopped caring about proving my worth, I became unstoppable. When Leela called me a family embarrassment, I thought that pain would break me. I truly did. Standing there, amidst the laughter and the celebration of her wedding, I felt a kind of smallness I'd never known. It was like the whole world shrank down to just that one moment, that one cruel phrase. But now, looking back, I see it wasn't an ending. It was the spark that ignited the best chapter of my life. Without that insult, without that raw, stinging humiliation, I would have stayed small. I would have remained hidden in the shadows of my family, forgotten, content to be overlooked. That moment, which I thought would be my undoing, became my turning point. You know, they say sometimes life buries you, but it's not always to end you. Sometimes it's to plant you where you can finally grow stronger roots, away from the shade of others. My son, Etha, he often asks me, "Dad, if you could go back, what would you change?" He looks at me with such earnest eyes, trying to understand the past. And every single time, my answer is the same. Nothing. Not a single thing. Because if I erased the pain, I'd erase the lesson that came with it. I'd erase the strength that pain forged inside of me. I tell him, revenge doesn't need to destroy. It just needs to transform. At first, he didn't quite get it, but he's starting to. He nods now, understanding a little more each day. Watching him grow into a man of humility and compassion. A man who values character over status. That's the kind of victory that lasts longer than any empire. That's a legacy that money can't buy. There's a profound peace that comes when you no longer crave apologies. It's a quiet freedom. You reach a point where you no longer want them to see your success, just so they can regret their cruelty. That desire just fades. The peace that comes when you finally realize that forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's about letting go of the anchor that's been holding you down. I didn't win because I had more money or more power in the end. Those things are fleeting. I won because I refused to become like them. I refused to answer pride with pride, or cruelty with cruelty. I chose a different path. I let time speak for me, and let me tell you, time never lies. Its truth is patient, but it always comes out. You can let karma do the talking. Its voice is softer than a shout, but its words always echo louder and longer than revenge ever could. Now, my days are quiet. They're simple. They're filled with the laughter of my grandchildren, who'll grow up hearing stories not about vengeance, but about resilience. They'll learn that respect isn't something you inherit, like a piece of land. It's something you earn through your actions and your character. And once it's truly yours, no one can ever take it away. Sometimes, I go back. I visit the old farm, the one where it all began. The fields are greener now than I ever remember them being. The house has been rebuilt, stronger than before. I stand there, feeling the solid earth beneath my boots, and I realize a fundamental truth. I never truly lost anything of value. I only learned what was worth keeping, and as the wind brushes past my face, carrying the scent of rich soil and warm sun, I whisper to myself, not in anger, not in triumph, but in gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for the betrayal, for the shame, for the hurt, because without them, I wouldn't have been forced to find myself. I would have remained a shadow. The cruelest betrayals often lead to the kindest awakenings. They force you to look inward and discover a strength you never knew you possessed. So, if anyone ever asks me what revenge really means, I'll tell them this. Revenge isn't about making them suffer. It's not about evening the score. It's about building a life so peaceful, so fulfilled, so rich with love and purpose that their memory can't even reach you anymore. It's a distant echo from a life that no longer belongs to you. It's about being able to smile when you remember the insult, not because you've forgotten the sting, but because it no longer defines you. It's just a signpost on a road you've long since left behind. And maybe that's why, after all these years, I still smile when I remember that day. The wedding, the music, the laughter, the humiliation. Because that was the day I stopped being a family embarrassment. That was the day I started the journey of becoming a man who built his own name, his own peace, and his own legacy. Revenge fades. Wealth comes and goes. But dignity is the only inheritance that never, ever loses its value. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. Until next time, take care.